So the core of the passage, so this, I've thrown a lot of stuff at you, but the core of the passage is in these 4 verses, 22 to 24. To put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self. So if you get nothing else out of this lesson, this is it. This is what Paul is trying to get across. So put off, renew, put on. Hey, you guys remember this movie?
Yes.
Yeah,
Wax on, wax off.
there you go. Wax on, wax off. So think a little bit about it, but the other way: wax off, wax on. You know, put off, put on. So yes. So put off your old self in verse 22. The word there, put away, lay aside, to strip off, as in the case of old filthy clothes. You know, I don't know if you guys have had this experience. Sometimes I go for a run, especially in summertime, and I come back home and I'm sweaty and I'm stinky, and I want to take this off. You know, I just want to take it off. And sometimes those clothing kind of, they stick to you. They're hard to take off. And this kind of just, you know, putting off the old self, sometimes it's like that. It's like, it's stinky, you want to get it off, but it's hard to get off. Yet we're called to do that. And then the word for old there is not just old in the sense of time having passed. It's old in the sense of being obsolete or inferior because it's old. And then finally, the word self is the word for person or human being. And then in contrast to that, we're told to put on. Put on. And the word there is to put on, is used to put on clothing or apparel, to wear. So we're to wear this new self. Put it on in that sense. And then the word for new there is in existence for a relatively short time, not previously present. So we're not talking about a kitchen remodel here. You know, a lot of times, oh, I love my new kitchen. I just remodeled it, but it's not a new kitchen, is it? It's, unless you tore the whole house down and built it from the ground up, it's really not a new kitchen. It's just you kind of change some things about it, maybe a lot of good things about it, but that's not what this word means. This word means it didn't exist before. It wasn't there. God created it, this new self. And the word for self there is the same as in the prior verse. All right, so breaking news. Breaking news. COVID-19 crisis challenges Christians. So as I read this passage, I really couldn't get away. You know, I was like, you know, we all need a break. Let's talk about something else. This is all we hear. But as I read this passage about putting off the old self and putting on the new self, I just couldn't, I couldn't get past the work that God is doing in my own heart through this time. The things that I need to put off. The things that this time of worry and anxiety is bringing up, that I realize are the things that God doesn't want in my life, and then the things that I need to put on. So I have a couple of questions here. Maybe you guys can chime in. What parts of our old self has COVID-19 brought to light? And I mean us, not those people that are panicking at Costco, okay, and buying a lot of toilet paper, but I mean in us Christians. What parts of our old self has COVID-19 brought to light? And how can we meet the COVID-19 crisis by putting on the new self? You guys have any thought on that? I'm going to open up for discussion a little bit. I know these are heavy questions, but what comes to mind?
Anger.
Anger. What kind of things are we getting angry at?
Stupid people. We're being truthful here, right?
Yeah, let's be honest.
I don't like the idea that a few people are causing trouble for all of us in relating to go back to the Costco toilet paper thing. My daughter checked online on eBay, and sure enough, there's toilet paper on eBay for huge amounts of money. And that tells me the criminal sorts, they immediately thought of, what can we do to get something out of this? And that that concerns me every time I see the few causing trouble for everybody.
Yeah.
That reminds me of when you're in school and the teacher says, okay, because little Johnny can't control himself, we all stay in from class, from recess.
I think a lot of us are afraid too.
Exactly what I was going to say, Joe, is fear. And I think, you know, we've all learned it's easy to, you know, get caught up in the news and the worry and the, you know, the rumors that might be going around. And, you know, there's some of it, fear can be healthy, and that we need to pay attention and be realistic in how we need to protect ourselves and our families. Yet, I think not letting that fear grab a hold of our hearts. And I mean, Ed and I had some very real conversations before I went back to Florida, and just like, okay, what is the worst thing that could happen? And where is our hope?
Mhm.
And, you know, those are not the easy things to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
My worry is not so much about the virus, but how the craziness is impacting the economy and my investments. We just had the Zoom conference yesterday with one of my investment counselors, and he was trying to show me how I'm okay to go ahead and retire, but I'm looking at all this stuff around me, and I retire in a month, and already I've lost 13% of my investment, and that's very concerning to me. And so I realized that, okay, I'm seeing some of my wealth, if you will, evaporating in front of my eyes, but that's not really what I should be depending on. I should be depending on the Lord to supply what I need. And my counselor isn't necessarily a Christian, but he is telling me I don't need to worry about this because I'm still in really good condition. So I feel like that, for me, that's the Lord trying to encourage me. Don't worry about this.
I agree. Fear not. This is John. Fear not. That was one of my annual books that I would rely on. Now it's happiness is a decision that I'm relying on. And there were times in my life where we were too busy. And I would sit in bed and say, you know, all these problems, and maybe it'd be good if I broke my leg and stayed home for a month. And this gives me the opportunity to enjoy what I do have and what I can enjoy as a recreation. And yeah, I'm almost enjoying the fact that I'm not trying to still work and have a job. That's kind of self-destructed on myself in 2008. Those are my comments.
I think we take so much for granted. And this has brought to light things that we need to think about, that maybe we need to think about more because we take advantage, you know, we're take for granted our homes, our health sometimes. There's so many things, our closeness with our families. And right now we're being separated, and the only way we can talk is like this, by phone. You don't actually get to see or hug. I think I miss hugging. And it just makes me appreciate that stuff more.
This morning in my own devotions, and listening to some teaching by Tim Keller, I began to wonder if, in fact, that this might not be that the most important thing that could come out of this is that God is calling us back to a single-minded devotion to Himself. I think it's so easy to forget many of the things you've just been sharing, and forget what the real basic foundations are of our faith and what the true hope is. And I think something like this kind of strips away the false things and the things that aren't really permanent. And I wonder if this is better preparing the church to share the gospel in all the world. You know, Deborah and I, we work with Member Care with Converge, and we've been talking to missionaries, some of whom are caught. They can't go out. Some moved out of their place. They're living with their parents for an indeterminate amount of time. We have a couple that's in Indonesia, and another woman. So far, they're sticking to stay there. And the U.S. consulate is saying, leave. We're getting out. We can't take care of you. Another couple in Togo with 3 children, and they're trying to get out, and they can't. Others have left. They waited till the end. Another couple in Ivory Coast that is stuck waiting for the U.S. to send another plane there to evacuate. And I wonder if this won't give us a platform, if we remember the lessons, to be even better testimonies among the people groups we're all trying to reach through our missionaries that we're sending out. But I'll tell you another thing that's interesting. The missionaries are concerned with the economic downslide of this.
Yeah.
Is their support going to last? Will they be able to stay where they're at? Or will they see their support drop? It's an interesting dynamic.
A lot of good thoughts. A lot of good thoughts, folks. This is really a good discussion. And I think we need to, it's a discussion we need to carry forward with the Lord in our hearts. So some practical now, and now Paul gets even more practical, put off away. Translations either use off or away, so that's why I have the slash there, and put on. So put away. So Paul puts a list here of things we ought to put away. And falsehood, sinful anger, and I put the word sinful anger there because it's interesting how some translations said, basically, in your anger, do not sin, or when you get angry, do not sin. So it's not just saying that anger in and of itself is wrong or sinful, but it's what happens when we're angry that causes sin. In this translation that I used, the ESV, says, be angry. It's almost like a command. So there are some things maybe that we can get angry about, like, the things that anger God, but it's what we do with that anger. Don't sin in that anger. No longer steal. That one's pretty clear. I don't think we have to elaborate. Corrupting talk or unwholesome talk. And then a list here of bitterness in verse 31, wrath, anger, clamor, and the word clamor there, I had to look it up because I really didn't quite, it's kind of an odd word. It has the sense of a loud cry, an outcry of anxiety. Boy, an outcry of anxiety. God trying to tell me something right now. Slander, malice. And then what are we to put on? And so Paul here has a contrast. Instead of falsehood, we're to speak truth. Instead of sinful anger, I think it's implied that we have righteous anger, and anger that doesn't lead us to sin. In contrast of stealing, honest work so you can share. So it's not just work so you can benefit yourself. A lot of us work honestly so that we can have the nice things. No, so that we can share with others. That's important in this time as well. We need to share with one another. And then instead of corrupting talk, building up talk, constructive talk. Boy, this is one that I think a lot of us struggle with. It's so easy to have a put down or just to tear somebody down or something down. But how can our speech be something that builds up others? And then in contrast with bitterness and anger and all those other things listed there, kindness, tender-hearted, forgiving. And I neglected a couple of verses, and I don't want to neglect them. Verse 27 says, give no opportunity to the devil. And verse 30 says, and do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed, reminding us again about that promise that was made in chapter 1 that the Holy Spirit seals us. And depending on who you ask and how you squint, give no opportunity to the devil is in context with falsehood and sinful anger that we talked about. And then do not grieving the Holy Spirit comes right after this, no longer steal, corrupting talk. A lot of times these verses get used outside of the context of this passage to signify any kind of sin, any kind of bad behavior. But I think that they apply especially to these put away items that Paul lists here right before he gives these statements. All right, so here's a homework assignment. We kind of already started it in our prior discussion, but this is something that I want you to do this week. Make a couple of lists. What's your put off and away list, and what's your put on list? And I'm going to give you an example because I've been struggling through this time. So I'm just going to be very transparent, and I'm going to list what my put off and my put on list is. Okay, so get ready here. So this is how I look. How does putting off the old self and putting on the new self play out in this COVID-19 crisis for me? How does that play out? So my number one thing, and I'm going to call this my go-to put off thing. That this is the number one thing I need to put off is worry and anxiety. But along with that, when I get worried and when I get anxious, how do I try to fix that? How do I try to kind of make myself feel better? Well, first of all, I go, well, I'm smart. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to analyze this situation. I'm going to find the problem, and I'm going to achieve the solution. Another way I try to do it is, hey, Ed, you're going to be fine. Kind of like what was shared a little bit a while ago, the advice from the financial advisor. Hey, yeah, you lost that X%, but you're still okay. And I make the same argument to myself. Hey, yes, the market is down. Yes, your bank account is such and such, but it's still, you still got all this stuff. You're going to be okay, Ed. You're going to be okay. You still got enough. My resources. And finally, my strength. Hey, Ed, okay, you're 50, but you're not as old as those folks that are struggling. You're fairly healthy. You can still go on a run with your dog. You're still pretty healthy. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. But then invariably, when that fails, and it will by definition because it's not enough, it's insufficient, then I go back to worry and anxiety. And now my worry and my anxiety grows. And how does it grow? It grows into frustration, disappointment, bitterness, anger. Some of the things you guys were sharing. Frustrated with the situation. Some people are really stupid. And then I get in a really dark place. So what do I need to put on instead of that put off away list? Well, instead of worry and anxiety, I need to trust and surrender. And I mean really surrender. Just say, hey, God, I know you got me. I know I'm in your hands. And like David, I have some things in my life that I can go back to and go, you brought me out of Cuba. And that was hard. That was almost impossible. And David said, just the same God that helped me with the bear and the lion will help me now. Surrender to him. Trust in him. That's my number one thing I need to do. And then instead of my smarts, I need his wisdom. Instead of my resources, I need his riches. And instead of my strength, I need his power. So that's my list. And I really encourage you guys through this time to put your own list together and see how God works in your life.